Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA and international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn how to bring your innovation from idea to startup to market domination. And now, let's jump into the latest episode of COIQ. Welcome back to the show, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, I have Richard Lin with me, who is the CEO and co-founder of Thrive. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Well, thank you, Dr. Roxy. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. So for our listeners and viewers that don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background and what you've been innovating these days.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Richard, the CEO and founder of Thrive, and we like to call ourselves the 23andMe for the microbiome. And I started this company because about 4 years ago, I took antibiotics, ended up getting really sick, and went to multiple different doctors. They said, you were too young and healthy looking to be sick. You're probably just depressed. And they gave me antidepressants. And kind of in that process, I started talking to other folks with chronic health problems that said you probably have a superbug in your gut from the antibiotics. And you should get that treated. So I got that tested, treated, felt much better. And really, that's what kind of spurred me to start Thrive. And my background isn't, disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor or anything like that, but my background's been building software products pretty much my entire career at companies like SAP, all the way down to startups like Deliv, which was recently acquired by Target. And really try to bring my software background and bring the scientific expertise around the business in order to get this innovation to market. And more specifically, our product is a direct-to-consumer DNA test, and we look at your stool or your poop. And based on that analysis, in 1 to 2 weeks, we'll give you a report within an app, which tells you about all the thousands of species of microbes in your gut, which ones are good for you and which ones are bad for you, which science has been showing that the imbalance of these microbes can lead to all kinds of chronic health problems. And then we personalize a probiotic based on your stool sample. And we also personalize food recommendations in order to improve your gut health and overall health as well.
So I think it's mind-blowing that this has not existed before.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the microbiome is a relatively new concept. Mm-hmm. I think that the term was coined about 10 years ago. And, the first step was, figuring out DNA and bringing in the new technologies that can sequence DNA. Yep. And that same technology was kind of bridged over for sequencing the microbiome. So it's relatively new. And so there's not too many players in the space just because it's a cutting edge science and technology.
So where are you in the innovation process now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've been around for about 3 years and we have a product currently in market. So we've tested it. We have tens of thousands of customers that have used our product that have received benefits from, balancing out their gut health. And really kind of where we're at is, we have our gut testing solution, and really where we're trying to go is test different parts of the human body that also have a microbiome. So there's vaginal health, there's infant and child gut microbiome health, there's oral health and skin health. And then the broader vision as we continue to expand the business is what I like to call the omics as a service or omics platform, where we're first looking at metatranscriptomics, which is the sequencing of microbiome. And then we're going to exposomics, which looks at environmental toxins, which can also affect your health. And then the final piece is genomics, which is your human DNA. So that's kind of the roadmap for where we'd like to go.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about where you were 3 years ago when you first started and where you are today, what are some of the commercialization decisions that you've made along the way, kind of looking back in hindsight, that you think has led to your success today?
Yeah, the focus that we have as a business when we think about commercialization is always start with the customer first. I know a lot of startup founders will try to build a really robust technology and then try to market it later to a customer. And that's usually the wrong approach. You end up building a beautiful piece of tech, but nobody wants to buy it. So, really the biggest kind of apex of the business has been focus on the customer and continue to figure out what the problem is and build a solution that addresses that problem. And you just continue to talk to customers and iterate. So that's definitely shown kind of the biggest success for us. And the second piece is building kind of like an MVP and iterating on small changes over time rather than trying to build a perfect solution, because you could spend, a year trying to build a perfect solution. And once you actually get it to market, you find out, customers don't actually want that. So we've always built it into our process to build a minimum viable product that can meet their need. And so one of the examples of that was when we first started the company, we didn't even actually even build a product. We just wanted to know if there was a customer in a market. So we just built a website with easy checkout and payment. And we reached out to the groups, communities, and forums that were interested in the microbiome. And we let them know that we had this product. And so they were able to pre-order the product. We mentioned that we were going to launch it in about 3 months. And we were able to make about $6,000 on the first day without having a product. And we're just building a website. It literally took us like 8 hours to build a website. And I used that data to go raise more money. So use that as, a traction point, a data point, brought it to investors, and was able to close a round in about 2 days. It was about $500,000 that we closed in 2 days using the data in that story.
Incredible, Richard. Incredible.
Thank you.
I don't hear that story, that strategy very often. Do you think that this worked for you because you're doing B2C and kind of circumventing, some of the traditional reimbursement, regulatory healthcare ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of companies that want to go down the insurance path will sometimes start in D2C just to, validate and get more data. Definitely a different model than, your pure healthcare type play. And if you want to get reimbursement from insurance and you need clinical studies and multiple phases, like that's a completely different approach. For us, because we are starting in consumer, we're able to bypass some of those steps and get data early. The downside is, we can't make specific claims that a healthcare company could. We're not saying we're, healing or fixing cancer or anything like that. But we can talk about non-specific symptoms based on, validated research to do that. But yeah, to your point, D2C has its benefits in that way. So
let's just kind of pull back the layers of the onion a little bit in how you did a test case to validate the business model and then use that to raise money. How impactful was that to your story? And, had you not done that, what do you think your difference in success would have been in your fundraising journey?
Yeah, fundraising is tricky, right? Like you probably read a lot of stories about the influx of capital in Silicon Valley, and money is just all over the place. Granted, investors are still pretty logical in the way they think about investing and getting a return. And so, I knew going into it, there were significant risk in the entire story of the business. For one, my background and my co-founder's background, we're first-time founders, so that's a big risk for investors. They love investing in serial entrepreneurs who've done it multiple times. So going into that, I knew I needed other parts of the story more well-defined. So building up our team was a big one. So, I was the business guy. My other co-founder was the programmer, the software guy. And then the third co-founder was the science guy. And so having a well-rounded team in the early stages helped a ton. And then having the traction data was super important because it showed a couple of things. It showed that there was a market, and it wasn't a top-down approach. I didn't necessarily look at a big market research study and say, oh, McKinsey said there's X amount of dollars in this market and extrapolate down. I talk directly to the customer, and I know how to, extrapolate that to a bigger market.
And they paid for it.
And they actually paid for it. Like a customer's commitment by their wallet, right? Yep. Like if they're willing to put money down, then that's the best way to prove out that there's an interest in your product.
Yeah.
And then the second piece of getting that data point was just scrappiness, be able to show with very limited resources, because it was self-funded at the time, that we were able to achieve and build even a small data point and get customers to pay for something with literally like no resources. So that scrappiness, that signal helps a lot for investors to kind of get over the edge and say, "Oh, I want to invest in this founder."
So what has that fundraising journey been like for you? Kind of just walk us through those different milestones and what's happened at different stages.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I kind of go into the history of it, I'm sure your audience is already well aware, but in venture capital, in the past, I'd say like 5 years, the funding dynamics have changed a little bit. So before it was like you raise a seed round and then you go straight to a Series A and then B, C, D, and so forth, an IPO eventually, or you sell your company. Nowadays, seed has actually broken up into 3 stages. So it's pre-seed, seed, and post-seed or seed plus, and then Series A. And what used to be the Series A milestone is now your seed milestone. So because building a product and building tech is easier than it was, say, like 5-10 years ago with AWS and all these other tools that are available, investors are a little bit more strict in how they look at companies. So with that context, for us, we raised about $500,000 in our pre-seed back in really late 2016. And kind of through that process, we were just trying to build the V1 of the product, so the prototype, which included just our testing kit. And so we were able to prove that out. And I think we were at like 200K-ish revenue at post that. And then with enough signal that we could build a product, that we could have a team and so forth, we were able to raise our next round. But before then, we were almost running out of cash. We had like two more weeks of payroll. Thankfully, our lead investor came in. Our funding came in phases, but we raised about 1.7 on the proper seed round. And, we were continuing to iterate. And so we continued to improve the test kit that included the food recommendations. And then we also brought in the probiotics in that next stage of our business. But the probiotics were based on a quiz, and it wasn't actually, tightly integrated into the testing kit analysis and experience. And unfortunately, that product, mix was not only a little bit confusing to the customer, but it just wasn't a 10x experience. And, a lot of ex-founders, successful founders, investors will say, if you're going to build a product in a highly competitive space like probiotics, you need a 10x experience. It needs to be 10x better than the competition. And so we were able to continue to adjust the product and build kind of the V1 of that full experience of, the testing kit to the personalized probiotic at the end of our $1.7 million seed. So we were getting close to the end which is a terrible feeling, but we were able to double our revenue. Can't disclose how much it is, but, we got to pretty high, 7-figure run rate. With a very limited team. So we actually had to go through a set of layoffs and kind of get lean and really focus in. And then we raised another $4 million just recently in March by doubling pretty much all our KPIs, from top line revenue to improving retention to improving net promoter score and so forth. So in aggregate, we probably raised around a little over $6 million. And our goal is to raise a Series A in February of 2021.
Okay. So let's talk. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that, in today's world with healthcare innovators or entrepreneurs, we're talking to technologists, engineers, scientists, physicians, clinicians. And so not everyone is so clear about what was before or what's happening now in the VC world. So thanks so much for sharing that. You mentioned NPS, and you and I have had some conversations about that. So, share the story with our listeners on what you were doing with the NPS score previously and how things shifted and what that meant for you all commercializing.
Yeah, absolutely. So like any business, there's always metrics and KPIs that businesses look at to see the health of the company and the product and so forth. So NPS was something we tracked very early on Net Promoter Score, which, it asks a very basic survey question of how likely would you refer X product to your friends and family. And it's a score from 0 to 10, and anyone from 0 to 6 are detractors, which means that they kind of hate your company and they'll write bad reviews and so forth. And 7 to 8 are people that are passive. They're kind of like, meh,
We don't like them either.
Yeah, it's like, if someone else, another pretty girl came along, we would,
Right.
Move over, right? So, and then 9 to 10 is your promoters. They're your evangelists, your top salespeople. Customers love you, word of mouth, and so forth. And so you can have a score of negative 100 all the way up to positive 100. And we're relatively around like the upwards of 40 positive NPS, which is still more work to be done, but we're making good progress. But if you look at kind of the benchmark of other companies in the space, airlines or phone companies, cable companies, like in the negatives potentially. But that was one of the metrics that we're looking at early on. And although it was a good kind of lagging indicator of things working, it wasn't a leading indicator. And what I mean by that is, it's a symptom of something working, but we don't know what that root cause is. And so when we started switching from looking at like top line revenue and, cohort retentions or NPS to let's look further up in the funnel and see how we can optimize that. So for instance, if you're looking at conversion rates from a visitor to your website to buying your product, okay, how do we optimize that? How can we actually get actionable about it? Okay, you can improve the website, you can add in testimonials, you can do whatever, and that should hopefully increase your percentage of conversion. And then we looked at, okay, people that get a test, how many of those people are actually sending it in? Okay, so it looks like it's like 80 something percent. Why don't the other 20% send it in? Oh, is it because they need reminders on email? Is it because they need instructions or so on and so forth? So we kind of thought about that as well. And then for the people that bought a testing kit, how many of them convert to a probiotic subscription? And, we have pretty healthy numbers there, but it wasn't always like that in the beginning. And so how do we get folks from when they get the recommendation to be able to sell them, convince them, show them how the intelligence of personalizing their probiotic results in, better health? How do we get that, conversion up? And so we started tracking more leading indicators. And once we started improving leading indicators, we clearly saw a big increase in our lagging indicator metrics. So.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. What made you even think of this? Because I've interviewed over 200 healthcare innovators over the last year and a half, and I have never heard anyone talk about these types of KPIs so early on. And I think that's a game changer for you and your path to success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to think about kind of the metrics of the business is, something that you have to put in practice. It doesn't come naturally. To be data-driven is, it's kind of a mantra in Silicon Valley to look at the data and not to go off your emotions or gut feeling. Granted, data can only take you so far. It can tell you what's happening, but it can't tell you why. So, I think it's just being in a territory of Silicon Valley, and I've worked in a lot of tech companies where, being data-driven is kind of the top thing. And my background prior to doing product, which is kind of where I came from, product management and software companies, was in kind of marketing analytics and in finance. So it was always kind of a numbers guy, not only because I'm Asian. No, I'm just kidding. But the numbers thing has always been kind of it's in my blood. And so definitely helped me. It's helped me kind of shape how I run the company.
So beautiful. What are some things that you did to improve your leading indicators? Are there any key takeaways that you think our listeners could learn from your experience? I mean, I know everybody's situation is different, but I'd love to hear if there's something that they could learn from you.
Yeah, for sure. I think because this is a case by case basis, what would probably be helpful is like the framework of how we thought about it versus like a very specific example. Once you break down the funnel and understand what those leading indicators are and where's the largest drop off, so that should always be the framework. All right, we know the leading indicators. Where's the drop off? Okay, there's 5 steps, and the 4th step has like 80% drop off. Now that's where we should focus on because that's the biggest gap. And so when you start digging in, all right, those 80% of people that dropped off, do they have an email? Do they have a phone number? All right, let me message them, mass email them and say, hey, I'd love to chat with you. And then getting on the phone and just talking to customers, like I mentioned earlier, you're only going to know as much as your customer tells you. And so getting on the phone, talking to them, understanding their pain points, maybe there was some barrier for them to cross the finish line, at least for that step. And what was that? And then once you can, accurately diagnose the problem, then this is where it becomes more of an art and less of a science. Then you hypothesize different solutions that can address that problem. And some, solutions may work better than the others. And that's where, being data-driven really matters. So if you have 3 or 4 different things going on for that specific step of the funnel, how are they improving? Are they improving or is it decreasing and so forth? And you're going to get a lot of failures. It's just, when you think about kind of optimizing a funnel, it's very much like the scientific method. You run a list of experiments based on some sort of data point and you see what the results are, and you're going to get a lot of failures, and you might get 9 failures out of 10. And that one success is like, moves the needle in the business, and you're like,
Eureka!
hooray, hooray. Don't be discouraged. It's part of the process. You're going to fail a lot, and that's okay.
Yeah. So there's this formula, I didn't create it, build, test, measure, optimize. And I think that 4-step sequence definitely works for the funnel. It works for the strategy, the go-to-market or commercialization strategy, the product development. I think so many times we think that we should just build and that's it.
you got to measure it, right? And you got to iterate. Yeah. And there's a process.
Yeah. Or thinking that we build it, we measure it. Oh man, we didn't get it right. We failed. Instead of going into it with the mindset that we are going to build, test, measure, optimize, because we know that it's going to be an iterative process. So I think that's a great takeaway for our viewers and listeners today, is just to kind of have that in your mind from day one. That's just par for the course.
Absolutely. You got to ingrain that grit in yourself, because it will get discouraging, but know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So just continue to iterate. You're going to get more and more positive signals. But yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. So when you talk about these positive signals, I've had a lot of conversations lately about this fine line or delicate balance between, again, it can be, my commercialization, my product strategy, any of those things that I'm in the market and I'm getting investors or target customers that are like not buying, right? I'm losing them at the cart, or they're not investing, and I'm getting these no's, and being headstrong and determined in my vision and knowing that I'm going to get to, let's say 8 no's before I get to the 9th yes, right? Mm-hmm. Versus the flip side of that, when I actually should be listening to what they say and not being so stubborn and headstrong in my original vision or approach. And I really need to make some changes. How do you navigate between all the feedback that you're getting, and what are you like, yes, I need to change that. No, I need to ignore that and stay the course?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think, the unique DNA of founders is that, we strongly believe in our vision, and you kind of have to be a little bit crazy because everybody's telling you no. Like I remember when I started my company, friends were like, "What are you doing?" And then my brother was like, "You're never gonna make it." And
You're like,
sorry,
thanks for the family support, bro.
sorry, Wes. If you see this podcast, I apologize. And even my mom, it's funny because I was like, "Oh, mom, can you put a little bit of investment? I'm going to put $5,000. Can I borrow $5,000 and 10? We're going to put 10 grand into the business so I can incorporate in all these things." And I remember she told me vividly. She was like, I felt like I was like washing this money down the toilet, like flushing this money down the toilet. But you're my son, so I couldn't have told you no, even if I didn't necessarily believe in it. And then obviously that 5,000 became, seven, 8 figure business, right? So funny just thinking back about it. But to your original point, founders, they have to have that unique DNA. They need to be strong and believe in their vision. I'd say 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And they should be flexible like a bamboo, to be able to work through the currents, and the currents can be feedback from different folks. But it's also, you gotta, there's a certain level of self-awareness and just understanding that like not all advice is good. But it's good to, if you find patterns, like for instance, I'll use an example of like investors. If you talk to 50 investors and, half of them are saying the same thing, probably means you should probably fix that. Now, if it's just one unique investor that's headstrong saying, no, you have to change this, and it's like the only guy saying it,
right.
Maybe take it with a grain of salt, but definitely be able to be flexible and adjust, adapt, evolve. I mean, you got to do that running a business without investors and so forth, right? You have to continue to just keep iterating toward that as well. So I think it's like an 80-20, I don't think you should give up who you are and what you believe in, but you should still be flexible. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I want to, kind of ask you, I'm going to throw out 2 questions, but they're interrelated. So I want to know, for our viewers and listeners, what are, some of the greatest challenges that you faced in your journey so far and how you overcame them? And then I want to know, what are some of your biggest successes?
Yeah. So I guess
we're going deep, Richard. We're going deep.
I guess we start with the bad news first. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, the biggest challenges, I think, one of them was, starting a company in the digital health space is difficult because it's multidisciplinary. You have folks in science, you need folks in marketing, you need folks in engineering, and it's just a whole host of different skill sets. And to build a team around that has been the most challenging, especially since I came from like a software background and more of a business background. I didn't come from academia.
Yep.
And so I remember very vividly trying to break into that network, whether it's finding new employees, finding a co-founder, talking through, different things. And I don't want to generalize academia, but they generally have a certain attitude toward people that are what they call being in industry, which is like being business. Tend to be very skeptical. And so that was a very difficult challenge to overcome, to convince people. I think what helped was getting the right advisors on the team to show, obviously who's serious about the science of the business, and then getting those advisors to vouch, whether it's to get on a phone call or talk to the potential employee that I was trying to bring on the team, to kind of squash their fears and barriers to working at Thrive. So that was one thing. And then, one of the other things which kind of relates is, startups or business in general is made up of people, and there's always competing viewpoints, whether it's like an investor or an employee, customers. They all have different needs, and you're trying to keep everybody happy as a CEO of the company. And so really understanding, I think I've kind of gone from building technical skills to building people skills. And really my job is I'm just a router between different people right now, and learning how to manage that and what people's needs are, and being able to ask the right questions and being supportive and helpful has been kind of a learning experience. And so whether it's management books or even self-reflection, I'm a Christian, go to church and think about those things has definitely helped in building up the people skills and kind of building a genuine character to be a CEO. So those are some challenges.
Well, and I just want to say to that point, I think that sometimes, and I'm not saying it's you at any point, but you might find yourself an innovator that maybe came into it as a technologist or engineer or academic founder. And then at some point you realize that in order to really run and grow this company, it's requiring a different skill set that you have and need to look at like, well, maybe I'm not the best person to be the CEO because I really am I'm not good at it. And I don't even want to do that. Like I had the founding idea, but I don't want to read the management books. I don't want to route people. I want to be able to do this other thing over here. And so I think that, just being able to have that self-awareness that you talked about to be able to make that decision, it can be a game changer for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've definitely seen successes with different companies. I believe like Google's founders did it for a while, and then they brought in Eric Schmidt to run the operations of the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been definitely a evolving and learning experience. But there's definitely parts of being the head honcho, in a sense, where my role's kind of evolved. That I'm not super excited about like accounting and like HR, kind of those areas. I'm just
right.
I don't want to do that. I just want to build some product,
Right, exactly.
But I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Well, making it.
When you have that self-awareness, you realize what your strengths and your talents and passions are, and then you bring
in the right people.
Yeah,
exactly.
Completely.
Delegate it to someone better.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you had a second part of the question about successes, right? Yeah. I think I talked about this briefly about, getting the initial traction of customers and closing our round. Definitely seen that as a huge success, especially how quickly we closed about $500,000 in about 2 days. That was probably my shining moment because I went in there with like not super strong confidence. I was like, man, it's my first time raising money. Am I actually going to be able to do it? And then $500,000 hits the bank and it's like, wow, it actually happened. I guess we're off to the races. So that was kind of the inflection point of like, hey, anything is possible, if you put your mind to it. And so that's probably one of the bigger successes. And then the other side where it really tested my character of being a CEO was when we had to lay off the team and really think about, how do we, obviously keep the business alive and pivot, but also make sure that the folks that are departing ways with us, how do we set them up for success and helping those folks, whether it's with recommendations and referrals, and getting them situated in a job. So it was an easy transition for them in terms of being able to financially support themselves and their families. That was probably a big learning experience for me and huge success, not so much in a layoff in itself, but being able to work through that process and kind of take the company to where it is now, kind of like resurrecting and reviving it. So
it never feels good, no matter how many times you do it.
It's ripping off that Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It's like,
So I want to go back to and just give you an opportunity to talk just a little bit more about the customer discovery. So what I sense from you is that this isn't a one-time exercise. It wasn't something that you did for 3 months or one focus group or even a batch of focus groups, but it sounds like it is just part of your culture and part of your ongoing business, that you've truly integrated the different customers into that product development, product management, maybe even product launch process. So is that the case? And if so, tell us what that looks like. Because so many times I'm spending time trying to persuade people to actually get them involved, even for the focus groups, much less going that far where this is just what we do all day, every day. We've got their input coming in.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, there's different ways to get feedback. The most organic ways to actually meet these people in person, talk to them, see them use the product, and then you can really, bring out a lot of great nuggets for that. I wish I did that more often, to be honest. I probably do, a handful of phone calls every quarter just to get a really good pulse on it. So phone calls is like kind of my go-to because you get a lot more, qualitative information as you're talking. But we have, feedback loops that completely automated. So, whether it's surveys that we send out every week to different segments of customers, whether it's like your post-purchase survey right when they purchase the product, pretty much that entire customer journey, we're asking questions about them and trying to get more information, and that plugs straight into different dashboards we have. We plug it into Slack, so our product team has a good pulse of all that qualitative information that comes through. People that churn, when they cancel a subscription, we want to know why they canceled. Was there anything we could have done better? Any product that we could have built? So all that gets fed into. And I think our main channel right now to get updates is Slack. We have a Slack channel, just pure customer feedback. And, it's always constantly pinging, and we just go in and look on a daily basis. Like, what are we seeing? Anything that we can create into a new feature? Maybe it's a bug, put it into our Jira, which is what we use for project management and, software development, product development. And then it goes straight to, the team, and we prioritize and start trying to execute on it. So.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. So is there anything else that you would want to share with our viewers and listeners before we wrap up? Any words of wisdom?
Oh, man. If you're going to start a company, try to do your best to find a problem you're very passionate about that hopefully has also affected you. I've tried building several startups prior, but it was more about like, I just want to build a tech company and
it's the cool thing
make some money. Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing to do. And it's like, maybe it's kind of a cool idea. And it just never followed through. I spent 3 to 6 months, kind of going through the process. And, for Thrive, like I actually went through a health problem and became very passionate, became a domain expert by reading, countless articles and research scientific journals on the microbiome. And so that definitely helped me understand the problem, understand the customer, and be able to talk the talk, if you will. And it helps because if you're passionate about the problem, you will continue on and you won't give up. And so that's the biggest thing. And, the second thing is just grit and don't give up. They say startups don't die, founders quit. And it's true. If the founder is willing to continue, even if it looks like doom and gloom potentially, the founder will always find a way. And so, having that drive, and I think that's tied to kind of the passion and understanding the problem, will get you there. So that's the little nugget that I'll leave for your audience.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom with our viewers and listeners. How can everyone get a hold of you if anyone wants to follow up with you after the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So company's called Thrive. You can find us at www.thriveinside.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Any social channels is at Thrive Inside. If anyone wants to reach out directly, I'm Richard at thriveinside.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dr. Roxy.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.